meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
I'm happy to.
Where do you live?
I'm in Venice Beach, California. Where are you?
Oh, I'm in LA. I'm in West Hollywood.
Oh, okay. We're nearby.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay, so I'm just going to give a very brief introduction. Dr. Wendy Walsh, she's a professor of psychology and a radio host, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and you got your master's and PhD in psychology, but specifically science of love. And what I love about it is that you did all of that while having 2 kids.
Yeah. As a single mother.
Wow.
Nobody's supporting me. I'm like
How
the
did
ultimate.
that work?
I've never had a man's money ever once in my life, not one penny.
Love that.
Made it all. It was rough, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Hey, you did it. Got to do what you got to do. Sometimes you just got to pull up those sleeves and, be the man and the woman of the house. It's very admirable. I love that. And did you go to school out here in LA or?
Yeah, so I'm Canadian. My BA is in journalism, and I went to Ryerson University in Toronto. And then I moved here in my late 20s, and I was in media. I was a local news anchor. I hosted shows like Extra. And then I had my 2 babies, and I was very curious about the developing brains inside my womb, and even more curious about how to develop them outside of my womb once they were born. So when I was pregnant and nursing, I went back to graduate school in Los Angeles and got a master's and PhD in psychology. But the area of interest is attachment theory. It's the ways, because at the end of the day, those early childhood relationships, those hopefully secure attachments with your primary caregivers, are the thing that become your model for love. And it rolls around in your head, and then it plays out in your adult romantic life.
Of course, yeah. And it's so fascinating, all of these things, once you start learning them as an adult and you start, solving the puzzle that is you, right?
Yep.
Like things start, like you start figuring yourself out. And, there's this really common theory that goes around where, like, I hear people in dating say it all the time, where you tend to look for your parents in your partner. For example, if you're a woman, you tend to look for your dad. And if you're a man, you tend to look for your mom in dating and in a partner. What do you think of that theory?
Well, I think our model for love is based on 3 relationships in our life from early life. And again, a lot of this stuff happened when we were pre-verbal, right? So we stored it in our bodies as feelings. And the 3 relationships are the relationship we had with our mother, the relationship we had with our father, and the relationship we witnessed between the 2 of them. And those 3 relationships inform our mind and create a kind of mosaic of what is love for us, our belief system of what love is. Now, you can only imagine, what if one of those parents was missing? What if one of those parents was abusive? What if you witnessed an abusive relationship between your parents, right? So there's all kinds of room for it to turn into a faulty model for love, but that doesn't matter. You'll still go out and try to recreate it because that's familiar to you.
Yeah, right. It's like a lot of times you gain consciousness over the fact that, your pattern might be toxic, but you just can't help it because you keep going back to what's familiar.
Yeah, and I want to remind people, like, this is not to blame people for any of their romantic choices, right? All of this is unconscious, and our goal as individuals in our adult life is to try to make the unconscious conscious. And that's part of the role of therapy, and part of the role of us being introspective and looking at our patterns and trying to make different decisions the next time around.
Absolutely. You just mentioned something that I'm just going to take a step, away from what we're talking about and ask that. You just used the word unconscious. I just started reading this book. It's called Inner Work. I don't know if you've heard of it, by Robert Johnson. It was recommended to me. And from the beginning of the book, it uses the word unconscious. And it's been really bothering me because I keep thinking it's supposed to be subconscious.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's conscious and then subconscious. What's unconscious? Like when someone faints, you say, oh, they've gone unconscious, right?
Well,
So
there's
what does that
different
mean?
definitions of the word unconscious. The word subconscious is used by lay people, and professionals in academia use the word unconscious to probably describe the same thing. Now,
Mm-hmm.
yes, then it's confusing because unconscious has two meanings. It has the meaning of asleep and out and not aware of your surroundings, and it has the
Right.
meaning of thoughtless, it not
Yes.
done without thought, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
we talk about unconscious processes as psychologists, we talk about behaviors that are done without thought. And part of the job
Exactly.
of therapy is to put your thinking cap on and put some thought to those behaviors.
Interesting. So it means the same thing as subconscious, but it's just like a different way of using it. That's just been bothering me the whole, 50 pages that I've been in the book. I'm like, why does it keep saying unconscious? It's supposed to be subconscious.
Mm. Well,
um,
it tells me by the fact that he's using this word that he's probably a good, reliable source for you.
yeah. Wait, actually, really? Because it's kind of been turning me off because I'm like, I feel like it's the wrong term. And when you feel
It's
like
the
a
word
book is
that
making a mistake.
it's the word that it's actually the correct word. It's used by
Mm,
therapists. It's used in academic research. It's used in academia. It's the higher level,
see?
subconscious. I don't know who invented that one, but somebody who wrote a self-help book who probably didn't have a degree in psychology.
I read this article actually for my school. So I study psychology as well. And it really caught my eye. It talks about how, how there's like a really common social misconception that women have like a lower sex drive than men do. Men tend to, get away with sleeping around because they have like a higher sex drive. They tend to want sex so much more than women do. And for women, that is kind of like it's frowned upon. It's, shameful, it's embarrassing to do that. And what do you think about that? Like, do you really think women have a lower sex drive and that's why they have less sex than men do? Or do you think there could be more of a cultural construct that goes into that?
Well, it's all of the above. You used a very interesting term there. You said men get away with, as if somehow women are penalized. And that's when we
Mm-hmm.
talk about it being a social construct, right? And right now we're at a time in our culture where many young feminists are doing great work in trying to erase the sexual double standard, the one that gives
Yep.
men points for sexual experience and the one that gives women demerit points for the same sexual experience. But as far as what the research says about sex drive, before I answer it, I just want to remind you that sex is a much higher risk hobby for women than it is for men.
Mm-hmm.
So if men have a bad night and pick a wrong partner and have lousy sex or good sex with somebody, it's a bad night. If a
Yeah.
woman has a night like that, she's potentially, because of her unique biology, more likely to contract a sexually transmitted infection than he is. She's more likely to fall in love with a loser through sex because her body emits so much oxytocin, which is the big human bonding hormone during female orgasm. And she's more likely to contract an 18-year case of parenthood. So as a result, historically, since the beginning of our time and with our anthropological days, women were slower. They had to assess. They had to find out if it was safe to have sex with this person. So you could call that a lower sex drive. I would call it a smarter choice making, right? So that's the
Yeah.
first thing. But the research does show that men do want and desire more sex than women do. However, interesting research also points that one of the reasons why women's sex drive tends to go down faster in a relationship than men's is because women actually need more novelty. Believe it or not, men can do the same thing over and over and clean the pipes and do just fine. Women need
Right.
like a date. They need a better outfit. They need a candle. They need like a different room, a better
Right.
hotel. Like our
Yeah.
sexual response system responds to novelty in the environment, not necessarily novel new partners. For
Mm.
some women, that's part. Other women don't feel comfortable with new partners. They don't even orgasm until they've had sex with somebody a few times because it's hard for them to get there with a new partner. But some women just need like a new position,
Something new.
something
Yeah.
new, much more than men.
Would you say that when it comes to novelty, men definitely would seek out more novelty more as in like in terms of like a new
Multiple
partner?
partners.
Mhm.
Men are definitely wired to want to reach out for more variety when it comes to partners. But I also need to remind you this: we are making sweeping generalizations about the biological sexes that are really, really unfair, because the truth is human beings have the widest range of sexual behavior of any primate,
Mhm.
right? So some primates, like chimpanzees, are highly promiscuous. Some, like orangutans, are very, very monogamous. And we have everything. Not only do we have everything within our species, in other words, there might be one man or one woman that desire a lot of sex with a lot of different partners, but even an individual man or woman may go through different stages in their lifetime where they're more monogamous, or they like more partners.
Right.
You really can't generalize at all, except to say that the research is pretty clear that men are less choosy and will take sex much quicker than women. One of my favorite studies that's been replicated over and over and over has a woman walking up on a college campus to
Yes.
various men and asking them, would you like to come back to my dorm and have sex? And literally 99% of the men say yes. The 1% say, I have a girlfriend, but can I have your number for later?
Ah.
Right? Whereas when a man walks up to women and say, would you like to have sex, come back to my dorm and have sex with me right now? Virtually 100% say no, right? It's because
Yeah.
women are not wired that way. We are wired to assess and be careful. And we don't trust a guy who wants to come up and just have sex with us. That feels like rape.
Yeah, it's interesting because that could that same study that you're saying, if I remember, a lot of the psychologists after that were like, see, this means women have a lower sex drive because more men would say yes to a random woman walking up to them asking to have
Yeah,
sex.
I wouldn't call it a lower sex drive. I would call it
Yeah,
like they're more selective.
caution. But
Yeah,
it's also caution because, like, you know, a woman could die, if it's like
exactly.
the wrong, you know,
Exactly.
decision to be
In
made. So it's like,
fact, when a woman is murdered, overwhelmingly, she's murdered not by a stranger. We worry about strangers in dark alleys, but the truth is, if she is murdered, it's much more likely to happen from her own intimate partner.
crazy. It's
Mhm.
also the same. It's also the truth about rape.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
It's
usually
so as
someone
I
that
said, it's a
you've
very
met and
high
you
risk
know.
hobby. And one of the things, I don't know if you saw my video about female sexual freedom.
Yes,
Um,
that's actually what I was referring to when yeah.
right. Is I really believe that female sexual freedom is about having the right to go slow, having the right to
Hmm.
say no to any sex act that doesn't feel good to you. Right now, a lot of women have adopted a male model of behavior and they think that's female freedom. But the truth is, adopting a male model of anything isn't female freedom.
It brings me actually to my next question. I want to discuss this hookup culture that is so dominant right now. And like the reason for it, I think, is this, new age, women empowerment, feminism, and which are obviously all very good things, but they seem to have, I'm not saying everybody who's a feminist and wants to empower women thinks this way, but it does seem like it might be going a little bit to a wronger way, which is exactly what you're referring to.
Well, I think the pendulum's swinging backwards. And I also want to remind you that the reason why you have an idea that the hookup culture is pervasive is because the media loves it so much. And those women who are out there and maybe just enjoying the pleasure of their bodies and using birth control and using protection against STIs, those few women actually have a very loud megaphone. They're rushing out
Mhm.
there to their social media telling people this is okay and this is cool, and it may very well be for them. But the research doesn't support that this is common. The research actually supports that most women don't want to hook up. That women want to spend time to get to know somebody. They want to have, they don't like situationships. They don't like friends with benefits. They're more
Yeah.
likely, the vast majority of women still want a commitment.
Yeah. So anytime a girl tells you, well, like, no, right now I'm just like not looking for anything serious. It's probably that she just doesn't like you that much.
Exactly. If the right guy came along, all of a sudden she'd be ready for it. Or unless,
Should
because
be
we're
down.
talking about attachment style. Remember, there are plenty of
Mm,
people of all genders who have an avoidant attachment style, and commitment is difficult for them. Emotional intimacy is difficult for them. So they will say things like, I'm not really ready yet, and I'm not looking, the language they use. I understand what is really motivating that language.
so what is it like for people who are not familiar with the attachment styles? There are three of them. So like the one that you just mentioned,
Well,
what does that look like?
there are four, and it's
Four?
also a scale and it's a continuum. In other words, people don't fit neatly into one category for every single relationship they're in. It
Mm,
change at different times. But let's talk about kind of the extremes so that
mm-hmm.
they're just easy to picture. So
Right.
somebody with an anxious attachment style has a lot of fear of abandonment and longing. So they're going to be the ones who are counting the number of minutes and hours between each text, counting the number of words in each text. They're going to be the ones they're vigilantly looking for signs of abandonment. They're going through their guys or female social media looking for who's liking what pictures because they could be potentially a threat to the relationship.
Right.
And what's interesting is that people who have an anxious attachment style are actually very, very angry about it, but they're unable to express their anger because they fear if they get mad, their partner will leave.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is when things are going well in their relationships, they create problems. They become the drama person because that is old anger from the past in these past relations, in the same relationship, that they feel safer expressing at that moment. Now, at the other end of the scale, and by the way, you can be anxious ambivalent, and those are the ones that are longing and longing and longing for love. And when they actually meet somebody who's there and present and secure and wants to give to them, then they're pushing them away. So they're the come forward, go away person. And at the other end of the scale, you've got the avoidant person who learned very early in the crib that help wasn't coming, that they felt easily smothered, that they feel independent, self-sufficient, that emotional intimacy is terrifying for them, that it is not necessary. And what's
Mm-hmm.
really interesting is that people with an avoidant attachment style always attract people with an anxious attachment style. So they get into these painful relationships filled with drama, explosions, filled with longing, filled with running away, filled with lots of breakups. And interestingly enough, those relationships actually last a really long time, but they're not happy, right?
Yeah.
Now, the category that we all want to be in is the secure attached person. And somebody who has a secure
Yeah.
attachment is somebody who can give love and receive love comfortably. There's somebody who has their own backbone of self-esteem. And when something's going on with their partner, they don't crumble. They're like, okay, let's talk about it. What's up? They can express their feelings very easily. And they're just generally secure. Now, this doesn't mean that they're happy all the time. And it also doesn't mean that there are never any problems in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
About their coping strategies, their conflict resolution skills, their communication skills. That is how you recognize somebody with a secure attachment style. They're not dismissive and run away from problems, nor are they overly combative.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there any way you could have a messy childhood with messy parents, yet still end up being, this type of a safe and secure a type of adult?
Define messy.
Uh, Anything that could possibly be messy. Maybe an absent parent, maybe parents always fighting, maybe not feeling safe, not receiving the love that you needed, maybe some trauma in your childhood, anything.
All it takes is one loving, secure attachment with a primary caregiver to help
Mm-hmm.
your brain make sense of the other stuff. I should also tell you that attachment isn't just created by parenting, it's partly genetic, right? So sometimes a baby and a well-meaning good parent are just a bad match. Baby comes into the world with a gene for anxiety. What does a baby do with a gene for anxiety? They cry and cry and cry and cry. Now, there might be a very responsive, loving, empathetic parent who picks up that baby every time they cry, who rocks them and loves them and helps them feel secure. And that gene never gets to thrive. That baby also might come into the world with well-meaning parents who read a parenting book that said, you know what? They're never going to learn to sleep through the night unless they learn to cry it out. We're going to do some sleep training with them, and we're going to let them figure this out. And then within a couple of weeks, the baby's not crying at night anymore. And the parent's like, this is amazing. But what has the baby learned? Help is not coming. I'm either going to be anxious or I'm going to be avoided, right? So there's always a genetic piece. Some babies come into the world completely independent and they feel easily smothered. They're swaddled too closely. Someone's shoving a baby bottle down their throat when they're not even hungry. I mean, most of this stuff is formed in the first 12 months of life when the brain triples in size. We don't remember it. We're pre-verbal. It is not stored as memories or a narrative. It's stored as feelings in our bones.
Wow. I mean, you think parenting's tough, and then you hear all of these ways that it could go wrong within the first 12 months when you don't even know what you're doing as a parent.
All we hope to do is make different mistakes from our own parents. And then we have evolved, right? We're still going to make mistakes because it's important also that perfect parents don't make perfect children. There was a great researcher in the 1950s and 60s who came up with this concept called the good enough parent. And he learned that parents who make mistakes, where the kid has to figure things out, those children do better than the one where the parent is constantly making the world safe and easy for them, or the parent who's very neglectful, right, or abusive. But somewhere in between is a space where kids learn to grow in our gaps of parenting, where they're forced to be self-sufficient. That helps them grow, as long as they know that overall, the primary relationship is secure and that they feel loved.
Yeah.
I have a great example of that. I lived in Italy when my kids were 2 and 7, and I didn't have any family there. I didn't speak the language, and I was taking them to school. And one time I got sick. I got a very bad flu bug, and I was upstairs in bed for 2 days straight, fever of 102, nobody to call. My kids were literally on their own. When my fever finally broke, I went downstairs, and they were basically in my bed and playing around, but I wasn't getting the meals. I wasn't changing diapers. I was doing anything, as a 2-year-old wasn't potty trained yet. And I came down the stairs out of my fog, and I look, and on the kitchen counter is a giant tub of melted ice cream with 2 spoons in it. They ate melted ice cream like soup for 2 days straight. And you know what? They turned out fine.
Oh my God. After that, I feel like as a mother, you're like, you know what? The worst has already happened.
That's right. And the dirty diapers, the 2-year-old had put in a pile. She was like changing her own diapers instead of going to the toilet. I'm like, what are you doing? She left the poopy diapers in the corner.
That's hilarious. Oh my God. So is there any way you can change your attachment style as an adult?
Yes, excellent question. So the research shows that there are 3 different relationships that can take place in our adult life that can heal attachment injuries and really, really change us permanently. One is, as I've been talking about, the parent-child relationship. So if you have an anxious attachment style, here's the cool thing. This child that you love desperately never abandons you. They never leave. In fact, you can't wait to get them out of your bed and off your lap. There's so much there. And also, as the baby is crying, as all babies do, and the parent consoles them and says things like, don't worry, I love you, and don't worry, daddy's coming home soon, and don't worry, mommy's right here for you, everything's going to be okay. At the same time, there's another brain listening, and that's your brain. So it is actually the act of being a good parent to the next generation that can heal the parent's own brain. You know, my favorite example is, if you're in a room and there's a dog and you say the word walk, and you're talking about something else, you're on the phone and you're talking about, let's do that breast cancer walk together. The dog goes crazy and walk, right? Because they're just listening for keywords. Your brain's the same way. It's hearing these keywords and it's healing. Okay, the second relationship.
I love that.
Is if you're lucky enough to happen to, because, choosing a partner isn't just about attachment style, right? It's a psychosocial phenomenon. So biologically, you got to be visually attracted to somebody. You got to smell their delicious pheromones that indicate a different immune system. Socially, you're looking at their profile, you're meeting their families, you're looking at how much money they make, whether they're vegan like you are, or whether they're a meat eater, what politics are, and all that stuff. If you're lucky enough to find somebody who fits your bill, that you're physically attracted to and checks all the right boxes socially, and they have a secure attachment style,
Ooh.
then the person with the avoidant and the anxious style starts to calm down, right? Because the secure person's like, oh, you're so cute when you spin out. What are you doing? What is this drama you're creating? No, I'm not cheating. I love you. It's okay. Do what you need to do, babe. I'm here, right? That's how the secure person reacts. They
He
don't
sounds
react
hot.
like, how dare you looking into my DMs? What kind of person are you? I mean, that's a person who has their own anxiety, right? Or their own avoidance. So instead, the secure person goes, you want to see my phone? Okay, here. That's so cute, right? So eventually the anxious person calms down. The avoidant person learns that it's safe to get closer. You're not going to be smothered or engulfed by this person. And the third relationship, which is the biggest one and the most important, is the therapist-client relationship. You know, it doesn't matter what degree your therapist has. It doesn't matter what spectacular intervention they make and what interpretation they make of your dreams or your thoughts. What matters is that appointment is on the schedule every Friday at 10 a.m. And good mama and good dada are always going to be there for you. And you learn to hold it together as an angry baby inside until that next appointment. And it's the consistency of the relationship. It is the positive regard that a therapist gives the client that helps them heal.
Amazing.
People call therapy reparenting, right?
Yeah, for sure. How about your own parents when you become an adult? Is there anything for your own parents that they could do to, mend?
That is a question that comes up a lot because first of all, when people enter therapy, if they're a good psychoanalytic therapist, the first thing they'll do is say, tell me about your mother, right? Take me back to your childhood. And many people don't understand that by exploring their reaction to their parents, they're not blaming. You don't have to blame your parent. You don't have to hate your parent, right? You may have to learn some behaviors to create some boundaries for your parent if they're being intrusive in your adult life. But that's not the same as hating them. You know, by the way, you can move 3,000 miles away and still have no boundaries with a parent, right? They can still have emotional control over you, right?
Yeah.
So it's not about boundaries that have to do with physical distance or how often you talk to the person. It's about not reacting. You know, a boundary, you don't put a boundary on somebody else, you put a boundary on yourself, and think of your boundary as a safety fence around yourself. And when someone tries to come into the fence, you need to have a consequence for them, move away, whatever, close up the gate so that they don't come closer. But using your parents to heal attachment is often very challenging. Because parents feel so criticized. So here's the thing, when a baby is handed to you in the hospital with no owner's manual at all, you are handed 8 pounds of flesh, 40 pounds of laundry, and 18 tons of guilt. And you feel guilt. You know, I use my own experience. I was a single mom for, well, I still am, so 16 years. And when I was at work, I felt completely guilty that I was not there with them, watching over them, keeping them safe, stimulating them, loving them, doing everything I needed to do. And when I was with them, I was feeling completely guilty that I wasn't working to make enough money to provide for them a good education or the things they needed. So parents will always feel guilty. And then the funny thing is, you feel guilty for working, you feel guilty for not working. And then when your kids become young adults, they tell you other things you did wrong that you didn't even know you're supposed to feel guilty for. And
oh my God.
it's really difficult for parents. I mean, I don't think that's actually the place to find the healing. I think individuating as an individual is the goal, right? And having a positive, healthy relationship with your parents, because before you know it, they're going to be aging parents and the roles will have flipped. You're now going to be caring for them. But it would be a very unique older parent who would go to, and a wonderful older parent who would go to therapy with their young adult kid and say, okay, you're right. I'm sorry I was wrong.
Yeah. And I mean, that on its own is like applause for that kind of parent, because
Yeah.
also like the older you get, you're very set in your ways. So it's very difficult to,
And the
like,
memories are different, right? So the parent
right.
says, no, that
Yeah.
didn't happen. No, you're not even
It
remembering it,
wasn't.
right? Because it's two different perspectives of things.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's like people get in arguments over something that happened a few minutes or hours ago, and they have told two different versions of it. So if
Yeah.
you're trying to like go years back, of course, like it's not even going to be the same version of the story. So yeah, I
Even
totally
if you
see.
interview siblings, you would think that all the siblings had completely different parents.
Yes.
Their experience of those parents are completely different.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting what you say. Like, you could be the best parent by the book in every possible way. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the best child ever
Well,
at all.
because life is also partly genetic. I mean, really good
Yeah.
parents, sadly, sometimes raise serial killers. And that's not the
Yeah.
parents' to blame. And then there are other times bad parents raise bad kids.
Yeah. Or bad parents raise really good kids.
Yes, the most
Does that
amazing,
happen?
yeah, well, they raise resilient kids, right?
Resilient. Yeah.
So the most amazing thing about psychology is, as much as it is such a science, I mean, there's so much studies now done on neuroscience, done on attachment behaviors. I think attachment theory is probably the most studied theory of psychology. But what we know is we're not robots. So I teach developmental psychology, right? And while there are certain parenting styles that create children who tend to come out with certain kinds of personalities, watch that word tend, right? Because there's another parent who's going to do that, and the kid's going to, there are some kids who have suffered so much trauma and abuse, and they come out so functional in their lives. And at the other end of the scale, you'll see a kid where if you're an outsider watching, you're like, come on, it's just words. It's a little bit of criticism. Why are they? And they'll have a life of anxiety and depression
Yeah.
because we don't know the
Yeah.
genes, right? We don't know if that's a particularly sensitive, sweet little baby who has a lot of gene for anxiety, right?
Yeah. It's really I think of it like it's kind of like chemistry, where like you mix like, different things together. You never really know what's going to come out of it. It's not like a, certain, like,
Well,
if you do
speaking of
this, this is what you're going to
chemistry,
get.
talking about adult romantic relationships, they themselves are a living thing, right?
Yeah.
The two people in the relationship are both continuing to grow and change as they should. And the
Mhm.
relationship is having to morph and accommodate their needs as they grow. So it's an
Yeah.
ever-changing thing.
And I think about that a lot, and I think that's what makes monogamy really difficult, because a lot of times with a person that you love for so long, you just grow apart, and it becomes exponentially harder to keep them
You,
in your life.
you grow apart only if you don't do the work of staying connected, right? So people will meet somebody that they're fabulously attracted to. They get
Mhm.
that cocktail of neurohormones called lust at the very beginning of their relationship. Then that calms down after a number of weeks or months or a year maybe. And then they have to do the work of reintroducing themselves and getting to know their partner over and over and over, and the work of talking about each other's needs. And in a good, loving relationship, even when we're talking about keeping excitement in a sex life, it absolutely is possible. There are all
Yeah.
kinds of tips and tricks that people can use to keep a physical relationship alive, as well as the emotional piece. But you have to keep it, you can't put it on autopilot.
Even when life gets busy, even when you have kids, even when you have work, with all of that, it's like the relationship is also work. You can't just, let go of it.
It is a garden. If you
It's
ignore
so
your
much work.
garden, it will die. You have to water it, you have to feed it the right nutrients, You have to pull the weeds. And that's what a relationship is.
Yeah. It's the honeymoon phase, and then it's the fighting phase where you mentioned, like, in the beginning, yeah, it's like lust and love and everything's rainbows and butterflies, and then you really, get to know each other and unveil the real characters and personalities and really start to work with each other. But then I feel like when people figure that part out also, and they usually get married, then it's just like, okay, we did it, it's over, we have each other, we figured it out, and then slowly it
Yeah.
declines.
And I wouldn't say always it's a fighting phase, because, if two people get together who are both have an avoidant attachment style, they
They
live
get
like,
along.
they live like perfect roommates. People say, oh, they have such a great relationship, right? They never, whatever, but it's because they also have no intimacy. There's no threat of intimacy. And the research shows that people who have more emotional intimacy tend to be happier and tend to stay together longer.
So would you say people who fight more after that initial honeymoon phase, that means that maybe you're just not that compatible with this person? Or is that a natural thing to happen after the honeymoon phase is over?
Well, this is some really interesting research on couples. Did you know the healthiest, happiest couples actually fight the most? Now, when I say they have the most
Really?
conflict, yeah, they don't use what John Gottman calls the 4 dark horses of the apocalypse, meaning they don't do name calling, they don't do
Mm,
stonewalling, that's silent treatment. They don't completely devalue and take away the identity. They're not deeply sarcastic. What they do is they have small border skirmishes all day long, and it prevents the big wars. When I say all day long, I'm exaggerating, but people who have healthy relationships, if something bugs them that their partner did, they tell them right away. And the partner says, oh, maybe you're right, or no, I agree with this. And they do a truce, they do a compromise, and they move on. But people who walk around on eggshells, they
they
wait.
sound like really healthy people.
Yeah, there are lots of healthy people out there. But the people who walk around on eggshells and then end up having a big explosion, those are the ones with the unhealthy relationships.
Or it's not so much of an extreme. I feel like those two examples were both so extreme. Like the first ones were so peaceful and understanding, and second ones were like
Oh
so
no, they still
volatile.
argue. They're not
You
peaceful. They still
know?
argue, but
Mm-hmm.
it's short fire up skirmishes with fun little makeup sex. It's not it's not the big drama.
Yeah,
Never the silent treatment.
never the
Never
silent treatment.
you're always, you don't care about me. None of that, right? It's more like, I told you it bothers me when your car is parked too far over in the garage. I can't fit in. And he goes, well, I come in late. I got to do that turn. It's too hard for me. But honey, if you cared about me, you'd at least move. All right, let's talk about. And then they get into a little skirmish, and then they figure out the car thing. And then they go, all right, do you want to just go get brunch now? Like, they don't. The other thing about healthy couples is they don't need to have a winner in every.
Oh,
They just fight. They make sure that both their opinions are heard, and it's a
yeah.
safe place for them to express. And then nothing's solved. They just go have brunch.
That winning, where does that come from? Is it ego? Because I feel like so many people,
It's
I mean,
competition.
I'm guilty of that myself. Like a lot of times I really have to catch myself and be like, let's be solution based, not so much, what did I say? What did you say? Let's just talk about like how it made you feel or how it made me feel and what can we do now?
Exactly. There's 2 truths in the room. There isn't one truth. There's always 2 truths
Exactly.
in the room. And what was the first part of your question? I'm sorry, I just forgot it.
Ego, wanting to
You know,
win.
it's actually your needs not being met, right? So the one who feels they need to win is the one who feels that they're not being cared for. So they need to establish that fact. I'm
Yeah.
right. I mean, what is a relationship? A relationship is an exchange of care. Now, that care can take many forms, right? It can be financial care, it can be domestic responsibility care, it can be sexual care, it can be child care, it can be emotional support care, it can be instrumental care when somebody's sick and you take care of them, right? And so relationships are constantly exchanging care. But if somebody feels that they need to be a winner in something, it's because they believe that their needs aren't being taken care of. Now, it's not to say that that's the truth. That's what they believe.
Yeah.
Because there are people who are just forever longing because of the damage that happened in their childhood.
Yeah. And I always think if something is bothering one of the people in the relationship, that's enough for that to be the truth. Even if it's not logically true, even if you don't think it's true, if it's bothering that person, it's true.
Yeah, it's a feeling. Nobody can argue with your feelings.
Right.
I mean, people get
Yeah.
into fights where they're arguing the facts. And I'm like, stop it with the facts. What feeling created your version of the facts?
Right. Now naturally, some people are debaters. Naturally, some people are devil's advocates. And naturally, some people tend to.
Just want to turn this off and I got to figure out how to do it. There we go. I have a feeling my daughter might be locked out because why would she be texting? Yeah,
Do you want to get it, Do you want to get it?
No, hang on. I can't get my phone to go the right direction here. Hang on. Maybe it's waiting until there. Now the call went away. Oh my God. This phone is sideways and I don't want it to be sideways. What is going on with my phone? There we go. I can just text her. Okay. I have to wrap up soon anyway. I didn't realize the time.
Okay. What was how much more time do you have, first of all?
I'd like to be wrapped by, we have 13 minutes max.
Okay, so like 5:30. This is what I was going to mention, that some people naturally want to win, they're debaters. When you catch yourself in an ongoing argument where it just seems like no solutions being made out of this, we're not reaching any conclusions, we're not seeing eye to eye, what do you recommend when you catch yourself in a moment like that, when you're not progressing? What do you recommend people do?
I also worry when you use the word naturally, natural debaters. They learn that, right? That happened in their family of origin. That is all learned conflict resolution behavior. So, but if you're feeling that you're in a conversation with somebody and you've reached an impasse, then the beginning and the end should always be about your feelings. And you should say something like, I understand how strongly you feel about this. I hear you. That's very important. I see you. I know that this is important to you.
Validate.
Validate what the feelings under. Don't, they'll get into the facts. No, but I'm just saying, I told you at 7:00 I was supposed to be there and I was waiting on the corner. I can see that you felt really abandoned when I was late. And I can see that really hurt you. And magic words, I'm sorry, like really mean it authentically. And then say, and I'm feeling really attacked because I was just being human and I forgot the time because I was looking at TikTok, whatever. And then the next step is, right, so it's I see you, I hear you, I'm sorry, here are my feelings. Then close with, what can we do in the future to make sure this doesn't happen again? Because I love you and I love this relationship.
I love that. Validate their feelings. Anytime, even when it seems like people are arguing logics or from a logical point of view, most of the time it's some part of them that they feel unheard or unseen. It comes from emotion.
They're hurt.
So if you can
you have to be a feeling detective, because a lot of people have very little emotional intelligence and insight into their own feelings. So a good partner is a feeling detective. So you might say something like, I know when I didn't show up, you probably felt abandoned. No, I didn't. I was fine. You just should have been there. I see it's upset you. Just find different words. The word abandoned felt too scary for them. So then you say, I see it upset you. I see you expect different from me. So you're just like finding lighter words, because they'll argue with the tender words because they're ashamed. They were never taught language for feelings. Most people were not taught language for feelings.
Yeah, and especially for men, men, I feel like, are raised not really being very connected or in touch with their emotions. A lot of times they don't even know how to put a word to their own emotions, let alone figure out their partner's emotions. So this is much more of a learning curve for men.
Yes, I think women do have to do the lion's share of the emotional work in a relationship. If you want that emotional intimacy, you can't just demand it unless you can give it, right? And there
Yeah.
is a diagnosis called alexithymia, and alexithymia is an inability to connect feelings with words. It's so prevalent in males that there's a subset called normative male alexithymia. And partly, you're right, that has to do with rearing, how they were reared. They were told,
Mm-hmm.
suck it up, big boys don't cry. And the only feelings that they were allowed to express were anger and hypersexuality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole range of feelings in between that.
And you mentioned emotional intimacy. And as a last question before we wrap this up, what are some good tips you have for people to create emotional intimacy?
Well, emotional intimacy is three components. One is becoming aware of your own feelings. Number two is finding language to express them and being comfortable expressing your feelings. And number three is being able to have empathy and compassion for other people's feelings and learn to be a feeling detective. But if you're not aware of your own feelings, you have a heck of a time trying to recognize them in others. So it always starts with you and the inside. And even if you just like, you can go on the internet and find a list of 36 most common human feelings and just start spicing up your language, sprinkling your conversations with that language. Get used to using them as you identify the feelings within you.
Yeah, like actually start looking at these things like work that you need to improve so you can
Yep.
improve the quality of your life,
Yeah.
right? Love
Add
it.
some new words every day.
Thank you so much for doing this. I know you have to get your daughter, and I really appreciate your time. I had a really great conversation with you.
You're welcome. I want to tell your people to make sure you join me over on my Patreon page. I have
Yes,
a
please.
wonderful community of love warriors, as I call them. And we do weekly Zoom groups where we have group conversations.
I love that.
I answer literally every single message on my Patreon. So if you're dating somebody and you don't know what their text means, or you want help
I
with your
love that.
profile, whatever, my private community I administer to. I think of my Patreon community as my employer, really, and I love them. So there's also a tier, there's 3 tiers of membership. You can get all my books, my podcasts, obviously all my articles, but there's a third tier that you would actually be a great person for the third tier, because I mostly teach dating coaches and matchmakers who don't have formal education in psychology. And it's like a love science education program where I do a little lecture by Zoom once a week. So it's great fun.
Amazing. That's fascinating. I think those are really brilliant ideas. I've never seen anybody do do that. So basically you're basically running a class
Yep. Well,
online.
one day is a class and another day is kind of like group therapy, but it's not therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just people
And
talking
then
about what they're going through.
the other one, you teach people how to become basically professionals.
Yes, I have a number of matchmakers and dating coaches in my love science education level. And, they're trying to fix up these people with each other, and they don't understand the unconscious processes. So understanding all the theories of love, there are lots of different theorists who have done great work in the area of the science of love. So yeah. So anyway, people can go to patreon.com/Dr. Wendy Walsh. I'd love to meet you there.
And what other places are people going to be able to find you? Where's your social
Everywhere.
media?
Right now, the world is TikTok, isn't it? I post a TikTok video every day, but obviously I'm at Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. And I'm host of the Dr. Wendy Walsh radio show on KFI AM 640 Los Angeles. You can download the iHeartRadio app and listen to it anywhere in the world.
And her social media is just Dr. Wendy Walsh everywhere.
At Dr. Wendy Walsh, at Dr. Wendy Walsh.
Incredible. I admire you. Your hair looks really pretty. Thank you so much for doing this.
I learned to do the front really well. Don't look at the back.
You did that yourself? Wow, that looks like you were on set and they did it for you.
5 minutes. You know, it's funny. I said to my 18-year-old daughter the other day, I go, how come I get so many comments about my hair when I'm trying to get this important science? And yet I look at the comments, oh, will you do a hair tutorial? And she goes, she said, your hairstyle is all back in fashion again, implying that I have an outdated thing. And she goes, and the young girls don't know how to do it. You've been doing it 30 years, but the young girls don't know how to do it.
That's so funny. I do my hair like that too, where you like brush it out. So it
Yep,
just
big
kind of
round
like
brush. Yep.
it does that thing. I think that's like the prettiest way to do hair ever. I do the same thing.
And when I was a teenager, it was Farrah Fawcett was doing it in the 1970s on a show called Charlie's Angels.
Oh, Charlie's Angels. See, my version of Charlie's Angels with Cameron Diaz and
Oh
Lucy
yeah,
Liu.
yeah.
And I was obsessed with that movie when I was a kid. I would watch it like every day almost. It was so
Funny.
good. All right. Well,
All right.
thank you so much. This was
Thank
amazing.
you. Nice to meet
All
you. Good
right.
luck to
You
you.
too. Thank
All
you.
right.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.